I'm really glad that you're able to share your story.
So I started in crypto back in 2013, and since 2014, I have been full time, like nonstop, 80-hour weeks, just pushing. And my first project that I actually got to work on, I have a master's degree in digital currencies, and first person to ever get any degree in digital currencies, actually.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I was really focusing my degree on sharing economy. Like, how can we use crypto in the sharing economy applications? And the biggest project out there, or the only project out there in 2015, really working in that space, was called Slockit. In Slockit had I sent them my white paper that I did for school, and some videos and stuff like that, and said, hey, I will work as an intern. Like, I just really want to get my foot in the door with your organization. It seems really cool and aligned with my mission. So I became their community manager, and this was the DAO. All right, Slockit's goal was to create the universal sharing network. Well, that's a term I created, but like this is the idea. Basically, an Ethereum node that could connect to IoT devices, that could connect to lockers and smart locks, and you could basically pay the lock money. The lock would unlock. You'd have access to whatever's behind the lock. You could, like, in DevCon 1, we actually had a working demo where you could, like, basically send money to a switch that would start boiling water, and then you could make tea. And we made tea on stage. And so the idea was, how can we connect these digital payments with actions in the real world and enable sharing economy applications? And of course, we were worried, like, oh man, we want to do a global application. How are we going? Someone's going to put weed in a locker and sell it. How are we going to get we're going to get sued or something. So we decided, hey, we're in Ethereum. Let's DAO it. The concept of DAOs was very near and dear to the original purpose of Ethereum, and a major talking point for the main people in Ethereum, Vitalik and the like. So we were going to be the first, like, big DAO on Ethereum. And because of our connections with the Ethereum community, we had like a lot of support with this. And the idea was, okay, the universal sharing economy would be one application and that the DAO would want to support. And so let's make the DAO first. And with the stated objective, the DAO will hopefully work with Slockit to support the universal sharing network and maybe also do other things. And so that was kind of the idea. And we launched in mid 2016, and we were way more successful than we thought. We ended up raising about $150 million. But to give this perspective, Ethereum, when we started the raise, was $6. And this ended up being about 14% of all Ether in existence. And that's a lot, 14% of all Ether. So, there was a lot of fear and uncertainty and doubt about, like, the safety of our smart contracts, since the Solidity programming language is only 8 months old at that time. So there was a lot of risk. And a lot of people actually said, no, we can't do anything, like moratorium on passing proposals. This is too big at this point. And they were right. There was a bug in the contracts, and a hacker ended up stealing about $50 million, about 4% of all Ether in existence. And this is where things got really wild, obviously. They only stole 4% of all Ether in existence, so 10% of all Ether that exists is still in the DAO. And me and my friends, the Robinhood group, joined up forces to figure out how, like, not only how do we recreate the attack, but also, like, when do we execute it. So we decided that we didn't want to be the other hacker. We wanted to play defense instead of offense. So we practiced how do we hack the DAO to rescue all of this money. We gathered support from the community, gathered resources, social and keys of other DAOs, and there's a lot of, it is very complicated. system, but we also got funds from whales in the community so that we could hack the DAO really well. The more money you have, the faster you can steal out of the DAO. Because basically the hack was the way the DAO worked, and why it got so big was anyone could send tokens to the DAO and get their money back, right? So if you buy one DAO, 100 DAO tokens is worth 1 ether. So if you put 1 ether in, you get 100 DAO tokens, and if you don't like where the DAO is going, you can put in 100 DAO tokens and get your ether back. And the hack, in simple terms, it's much more complicated than this, but they could put in a bunch of DAO tokens, get the ether back, and then make the transaction fail so they get their DAO tokens back. Right?
Okay.
And then do it again and again.
Got it.
And so the more DAO tokens we have, the more money we can take out of the DAO. And so we gathered all these resources and waited for other people to start hacking. And when they did, we hacked it better. And in the end, there were about 8 or 9 DAO hackers. We were one of them. But we were the best one. And we found a way to basically hack all the other hackers to get the money back, including the original hacker. But the original hacker, the way that we did it was through a hard fork, where we actually changed the rules of Ethereum with the community to say, everyone who has money that came from the DAO, we take all of it and we put it in a contract where people who have DAO tokens can get their money back. And so it was like, it didn't change. It wasn't a rollback. Sometimes people call it like, oh, they made the DAO just disappear. Not really. It was really called an irregular state transition. And we took all the money and just stole it from everybody and give it back to DAO token holders.
How did you guys do that? Because did you have all this talent of hackers in the team, or did you ask around we need help? How did you to hack this money back? Could you do that as a team as well, or is it easy?
Yeah, we had there were Slockit built the DAO, right? And so we had a few people who built the original code, specifically Leftovers, right? And we also had other people who, I was a community manager, and so I knew who was I had a good feeling for who was a good person in the community and not. And there was one person named Jordi Bellina who actually made liquid democracy for the DAO. And the day of the DAO hack, I was actually writing a blog post about it, and so he knew the DAO code really well, and was very much a trusted individual. So we brought him in, and that was kind of the core of the Robinhood group, which became the Wet Hack group.
Right.
Exactly. The anti-hacker.
Exactly. Then you traveled around the world with the keys. Can you talk about a little about that? What you had to do to keep that safe?
Yeah, I mean, after the hard fork, we thought we were good. There's a couple things around traveling around the world with keys. The way the DAO was hacked and the way the DAO worked was that when you put in your 100 DAO tokens and you get your 1 ether back, but you actually don't get your 1 ether back. The 1 ether goes into a sub DAO. And the idea of the DAO was that it would be a DAO of DAOs, and it would spawn off tons of DAO, like countless infinite numbers of sub DAOs and child DAOs that would become their own DAO. They were really autonomous. They weren't necessarily connected to the DAO. But in this process, when people were splitting from the DAO to get their money out, they made their own DAO. And there are important keys behind these DAOs. So there are people all over the world who made DAOs that we could basically drain the DAO's money into. And so we had to go find them. And people from China and people from Italy and people from the US were all sending me their keys so that I could basically know that we had all the power in these DAOs that we were going to drain the DAO's money into. So we had all of these private keys from random people, and we got their IDs, and was like, don't try anything funny, because we know who you are now.
Exactly.
And these sorts of things. And then, but when all of that worked out, then we went to you know, everything seemed cool after the hard fork. I was in Berlin with Left Terrace working on a lot of this. And, but then when the hard fork happened, there was this issue that, okay, so the hard fork happened on Ethereum, right? And what a hard fork looks like is it's a change of rules that you create in GitHub, you know, in the software, and you say, hey, everyone who's running an Ethereum node, download this change and update your software. If you update it, you're agreeing to these rules. So everyone had to consent that's running an Ethereum node, right? To basically hack the hacker, steal the money back, and give it back to everybody who he stole from. But the old software still exists. I mean, you can't change that. And so some people said, actually, the DAO hacker played by the rules of the blockchain, and they should keep the money. And so they ran the old software. This is mostly, at least from what I can tell, this was like Bitcoin maximalists that really didn't have Ethereum's best interest in mind. And so they, it was interesting, but they actually created effectively a parallel universe where the hacker was never hacked. And the DAO, the hard fork, didn't happen. And so now you have Ethereum, where all the money's back and safe, and we still had to do some cleanup of like, you know, edge cases that weren't covered by the hard fork, and there was a lot of work there that mostly I was supporting to make sure everyone got their money back. And then there was ETC, Ethereum Classic, where the hack never happened. And in Ethereum Classic, the White Hat group had 10% of all Ethereum Classic still in existence, and the hacker has 4% of all Ethereum Classic. And so now it's like, oh no, what? We have all this money. What do we do? Is it ours? Is it not ours? It's not ours. We don't want it. We don't even want it. We're trying to give all the money back. And it was really scary because now people are like, well, this is how you should give it back. And we got 3 lawyers. We got 3 letters from 3 different lawyers telling us to give it back in different ways. Otherwise, they would sue us. And it's like, oh no.
Yeah.
We're hackers. We don't have a legal entity. We don't have anything. So we all flew to Switzerland, where besides Lefterists and I, none of the White Hat group had even met each other in person. You know, we're all just hacking from all over the world. And we all flew to Switzerland within like 12 hours of getting these letters. And formed a legal entity and like tried to figure out how to give back the Ether Classic, which we ended up doing. And yep. we created this application, which I think is the largest application that ever happened on Ethereum Classic, and people got their money back. And for the most part, it settled out eventually.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, I love this story. I mean, it's such a great history. And do you think that because you were a community manager, that's why people were able to trust you and give you everything that role help you facilitate this? Yeah,
of course. And also it was my job. You know, I cared about the community, right? The most. I was the manager. I was like, yeah. So I was promoting it. I was connected to everybody, and I was able to just put it together. I think community management is critical for DAOs, obviously.
100%. Yeah. So Greg, I know has a question. So Greg, you want to ask your question?
Yeah, thank you. So I wondered if we could rewind a little bit because I got a little bit lost in the weeds there. So I wanted to ask about the passage from, is it Slockit or Lockit?
Slockit, yeah.
The passage from Slockit to quote unquote the DAO. I'm still not quite clear on what the DAO was or is. What was its purpose? And the follow-up to that question is, can you speak maybe a little bit about the cultural practices of that DAO at that point in time in 2016? Were you using Twitter? Were you using Discord? How did you manage the community? How did you sort of rally people around the idea? Was it just, hey, we're doing a DAO and this is new and you should be interested in it just so we can prove out the thesis of what a DAO is? Or was it some other sort of angle behind what it was meant to do? So curious about that sort of passage for the birth of the DAO and what the cultural practices were that made people want to take out 100 tokens in the first place.
Yeah. So the main purpose of Slockit was to build this universal sharing network, right? but we wanted to have it governed in its own jurisdiction effectively by a separate entity that was non-legal, that was not part of one jurisdiction or another. And so we built the DAO to be our investor and our governor, the governor of the universal sharing network that we built. And that was the intention. And of course, because we are very into DAOs, especially the A in DAO, which means autonomous, which means sovereign, which means like independent and outside, like resistant to outside influence. We knew that the DAO could do anything that it wanted. It doesn't have to just be the universal sharing network governor. It can do anything. So we kept building Slockit, but we also built the DAO so that it could raise funds, and if it chose to, it would fund us, right? And it would we would use the DAO's token to be a token in the universal sharing network. And as far as what community practices we built or we used at the time, Reddit was where crypto happened. Reddit and Slack. Everybody had a Slack. We did not use Twitter hardly at all. Twitter wasn't that big of a deal. It was all Reddit and Slack and Medium. Still used Medium in YouTube. And when we were doing, oh man, a lot of chats were happening in Skype back then.
Skype, oh my God. Oh wow.
Yeah. Telegram hadn't really hit it big.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how it evolved, because like Slack eventually gave up on crypto. In fact, they more than gave up. They said, we don't want you. We started excluding crypto because we were using Slack in a different way than they were building their platform to support. And they're like saying, hey, this is supposed to be for closed communities, not open communities. And we're not going to help you support, like stop all the scams that are happening. We don't want to build tools for that. It should be this should be a trusted environment. And so eventually the Ethereum community had to get off of Slack. And for the most part, there's still like core teams that use Slack, but again, Slack is, if you want to have a closed environment, sure. And for a long time, there was nothing. Then like Discord wasn't clearly the replacement. There was Rocket Chat, and there was Keybase, and there were all these other like startup solutions that the community were kind of playing with. And eventually now we're back in kind of the same place we were in 2016, 2017, where everybody has a Discord, because everyone there had Slack and Reddit across the board. That's what everyone in crypto had in 2016. Now it feels like everyone does Twitter and Discord, and we found like our shelling points around those communications.
Yeah. What are the best practices that you see? And if you can name some of them, say, hey, these are great examples of great DAOs.
Yeah, so maybe I'll start with like high level stuff of what the DAO did that was very successful. Number one, the DAO aligned with people who already had a lot of credibility. We had Vitalik in our curators list. We had all these other like higher up in Ethereum that were connected to us effectively and partnered with us in one way or another. And we had a lot of credibility, like straight up, like getting support from these other people was huge. Another thing was that we were very open and accessible. So we were providing educational access and informing people of how they could get involved, and we had kind of inner circles. So like anyone could join the Slack, of course, and then when people are participating and engaging, we would pull them into another bigger room, which is where we would kind of have like, this is how we scaled. So like we got a lot of people in the Slack, and there was a lot of natural engagement, and eventually it got to be too much. And so now we needed to appoint community moderators and give people certain powers to, like, you know, there's only 5 people on Slockit on our team, and like we're sleeping sometimes. So like if someone starts mouthing off in the Slack, we need someone to like be able to talk to them and feel like they have the authority. So then we started appointing community moderators, And that community moderator group could like delete people's messages and ban people if they were, you know, being acting poorly. But then that became kind of this inner circle of community leads that we trusted. And so we would also start sending them our forum posts and our blog posts in Google Docs and let them edit it. We would, you know, run ideas by them. And so like it becomes a win-win where you have this like inner circle that gets inside information, right? And we don't have a token or anything. It's just more like they're really interested in the project. And it's kind of like they know, oh, you know, their favorite bands might be touring here or touring there. Hey, what do you think? Where's a good place to tour? You know, it's kind of the same like opportunity for engagement and giving them these extra levels. And so, and then when we got really big, we even had like a tighter group that we would run by like really curious things that we don't know, like hey, should we propose this security proposal for $2 million to protect the DAO in case there's security issues, right? And like, how will the community respond? And so then we even had like, once the community moderator group got to be about 50 people, we started getting even a tighter group that we would run up of the leaders of the 50 people, you know? And so this kind of scaling worked really well for us. And I think now, as far as what other communities do that I think is successful, POAPs have become a huge thing. It's really difficult to do because there's so many POAP hunters, but POAPs are like non-transferable NFTs that give people some sort of reputation. And I think this like, I don't know, participate to earn, and even if it's not earning monetarily, but earning reputation is really valuable. We built a community within the Token Engineering Commons around this praise tool, where you can dish praise, like I'll dish praise to Cheng for bringing me to this event where I can talk and rant incessantly about random ideas, right? And then those actually, that turns into, it can turn into reputation, or it can turn into money, even tokens. But it's cool because like anyone can dish praise to anybody. And now you have this decentralized issuance mechanism that is created through a lens of gratitude, which is just like high vibes and brings a lot of extra like second order positivity to the community.
Yeah, I remember that dinner you guys did that. That was really cool. At the hot pot we did that. You guys did that. Your team, you guys were doing that. I remember watching that now.
So you basically also met in person in real life, like as a community, or
as much as we can.
Yeah.
The DAO doesn't. The DAO never really did. I mean, the DAO only, you know, we made our token and we existed for about 3 weeks before we were hacked. So we didn't really have the time to meet so much. In fact, I had met just Christoph came to Seattle once. That's where I was when we were launching the DAO, and I worked with Slockit for almost a year before I met anyone else. And I only met him for lunch, you know. Other than that, it was all remote. And as a startup, it's really hard to meet everyone all at once. But I do think it is really valuable, at least for the core team, to have like a humanity check. Like, oh yes, this is a human. I met them in real life, and I care about them as a human. You know, it's really easy to kind of like just see people as a face on a screen. But when you get to meet them and hug them, it's a different reality.
Okay, so you gave us the high level. Then what do you see out there in the landscape? Obviously, you've been involved in DAOs for a long time that you really like. What projects do you like, and say, why do you like them? What are they doing that's different? Because the DAO seems to be like the word, like NFT was last year, like of the year, the word like of this year.
I'm really into DAOs that are trying to make the world a better place and actually like solve problems that can't be solved through other structures. You can just create a company, right? You can create a legal entity. And for a lot of things, that's a great idea. But if you're trying to do public goods, as in you're trying to provide value for society at large, and you don't have a revenue model, you can't have a revenue model if you're trying to provide value for society, because revenue relies on exclusion and customers, right? You have to say, hey, customer, give me money and I'll give you access to this, or I'll provide this service, or give you this object. And so you only get it if you provide something, right? But if you're trying to say, hey, we want to provide this value to anybody for free, that's still creating value, but it's impossible to have a revenue model. So I really love taking that a step higher and instead creating an economic model where you have, instead of profit and costs and revenue, you have a token price and supply and demand. So you can issue tokens to the people providing value, and then figure out a way to generate demand for the tokens that you issue. Normally it's through governance and other access. So like maybe you're like, think of Girl Scouts selling Girl Scout cookies, right? It's like it's not a cookie business. Like
right.
That's some service that they provide on the side so that girls can enjoy nature. And sometimes if you have this core like for good mission, for instance, like the Token Engineering Commons wants to advance token engineering for everybody. But now, they're issuing these tokens, and now they have to figure out how to create demand for those tokens. And they're one of my favorite projects. And the token price right now, CoinGecko is messed up, but the token price has actually done extremely well in this downturn because they have a bonding curve. I really love bonding curves for small communities that are just launching. It allows a bonding curve effectively allows you to collateralize your token with another token, and then that makes it more resistant to these like huge price swings.
Yeah. Who do they bond their token to?
Just DAI, actually.
Ah, okay. Oh wow.
So that is why their token price hasn't really dipped that much compared to most. And so when you want to buy TEC tokens, you can go buy it on it's on XDAI, so it's on Gnosis chain, so HoneySwap or wherever. You can go buy it there, or you can also deposit wrapped XDAI into the bonding curve, and the token will be actually created for you, right? And so this is a different dynamic, and it's a token engineering commons, so they can pull off some of these more complicated dynamics. But the way they did this whole process was just so cool.
I wanted to go back to this idea of how to create demand for the tokens that you issue. And the idea you mentioned that governance is one of the key strategies to doing that. So what would you say, how would you prevent the trade of tokens simply for the effect of accruing more governance power over any initiative that the DAO or the token might control? If you say, yeah, we want, let's say someone's giving to the DAO. In return for gifting to this DAO, which has a charitable mission or some sort of public good mission, we're giving you a token. And now we're going to create demand for the token, right? It's cool to be able to govern over this DAO, so you're going to want to buy this token. How do you stop that from becoming, well, I want to buy a lot of tokens then, and I want to be the one that gets to vote the most about this DAO?
Well, bonding curves help a lot with that, because you can, first off, is that a problem? Like that's the first question. Sometimes, often, if you have a pot of funds, and let's say you have $1 million in this pot of funds, and one person puts in $500,000 and another person puts in $20. I think it's fair that the person who puts in $500,000 has more influence over how that money is spent, right? Now, ideally, it's not they have 10,000 times more influence than someone who put in 1/10,000th of the amount, because in the end, that's not actually best for the DAO. There is one token, one vote, or $1, one vote has some merit, of course, but also one perspective, one vote also is really interesting too, right? Because different people are sitting in different positions and they can see different things. And what we really want as a DAO is we don't want to just like, we want to achieve our mission. It's not about like, the focus of the DAO isn't have like this purest mechanism of governance. Governance is means to an end. What is the purpose that we're here for? And how do we best decide which direction to go? Because in the end, you have to make decisions to say no to things and yes to things. And so I really like quadratic voting. So square root the number of tokens that people have. People can get more tokens, and as they get more tokens, they have more voice, but they don't, the individual perspective still has value. So if one person has 10,000 tokens and one person has 100 tokens, right? Instead of the person with 100 tokens would have 10 votes, and the person with 10,000 tokens would have 100 votes. And so instead of having 100 times more voice, the person has 10 times more voice. And this is cool. This is nice. The person with 10,000 tokens should have more voice. I really do believe that. They have more skin in the game. They have more stake.
So what the DAO is giving is financial support to people, and therefore cultural capital is sort of bundled with that financial support. So would it be fair for someone that accrues a lot of tokens? Okay, I've got 500,000 tokens. I have more of a vote, and I should because I paid more, right? Well, I don't know, because now you can vote for all of your favorite people that will sort of benefit from the outcomes of this DAO, and you have more of a sway over sort of the cultural capital of what this DAO represents, or sort of what these contributions represent. So it's, I mean, in theory, yeah, one token or one vote or the amount you put in should be the amount of power you have. But power doesn't sort of align itself so equally in that sense. It's not just a numbers game.
Well, I'm saying that it should be the square root of the power that you have, right? So that being said, I'm very much a fan of also integrating reputation into governance mechanisms.
Yeah, or maybe participation too, is what you mean? Both the two together?
You usually earn reputation through participation, right? And then, but you'll have a reputation token, and maybe things can only be maybe you have like, things can only be nominated if there's this much reputation behind it, and then the token holders can vote. Or you can also do other strategies of like, a lot of voting in crypto is just bad. It's not anonymous, and you get real-time results. So that creates a lot of herd mentality around these things. So it doesn't have to be 50%. Like if it's a yes/no question, don't do 50%. Do make it like make it 95% is required support. And if 6% of the token holders vote no, then it doesn't pass. There's a lot of flexibility in the design space. We also have this thing called conviction voting, where it kind of also mitigates, it adds time into the mix. So when you support a project, you have to stake your tokens behind that project, and you only have, or stake your voting tokens behind that project, and you only have or behind that proposal, and you only have so much tokens that you can, allocate behind proposals. So if you're allocating behind this proposal, you can't allocate behind other proposals. So now the other thing is that your actual power to pass a proposal builds over time. So maybe the whale can pass some proposals faster, but they can only pass so many so fast. And a smaller person, maybe they can't pass very quickly, but they can pass a proposal that the whale disagrees with, even. So it's such a wide design space. Ranked choice voting. There's so many cool things for mitigating whales and mitigating plutocracy.
Actually, yes, for the quadratic voting, but the issue is that you can always create new accounts. So theoretically, a whale could say, I create 10 accounts, or the typical thing, like there are already sites where you can buy people to vote for you. And that basically creates an issue. So you will need to combine it with proof of humanity or something similar, at least.
Yeah, you always, I would say, combine it with your own reputation system. There's Bright ID, and there's proof of humanity, and there's even just straight up centralized KYC. or having just someone be a reality check and do it in a centralized way where you're creating a list of people. If you're doing quadratic voting, you have to have like civil protection. I don't think it's hard for a small community to do that. It's hard for a blockchain to do that, right? Ethereum would be nearly impossible to really pull that off. But for a smaller community, people know who are real people, and you can even just give people a POAP and just say the trusted seed, for instance, is a legal Swiss entity, and we have a reputation token, the trusted seed. It's called Trust, but we also have, and formerly it was called CStack. It's like the common stack trusted seed. But now we separate it out, and so the trusted seed has this trust token, but the actual legal entity is a one person, one vote Swiss association. So we just gave everyone a POAP and manually did that and then voted with the POAPs. There's a cool project, although sometimes it doesn't work all that great, but it's called POAP.vote. And you can do POAP votes there and you get one person, one vote, or you can use that POAP and say, design a system where to vote in this quadratic voting process, you have to have this POAP. I think that decentralization is a means to an end, right? Like it's a process, and the tooling is getting better and better and better every year.
Yeah.
But I don't think we should be decentralization maximalists. I really don't. I think it's important to like figure out what you're trying to do and the best path to do that while working within the resource constraints that you have. So if it's easier just to have one person manage your civil protection, then great.
I really like what Becky McCormick said, that it's not about decentralization, but much more about the choice, that you should always have the choice to choose what's best for your project or for your needs. And sometimes it's centralized, sometimes it's decentralized.
I mean, if you're Uniswap or you have millions of dollars in your back pocket and you can find some smart contract devs to build exactly what you want in the most decentralized way, then sure, great. But I don't know too many public goods focused DAOs that have millions of dollars in their back pocket.
So we've talked about some of the best. Have you, without naming them, but we can just talk about what their structure was of DAOs that were set up that didn't do well and what they did. Yeah, that didn't do it right, and they like missed an opportunity.
I think it's really easy to assume airdrops are going to give you a fair distribution in some way, and just be like, look, we did an airdrop and now we're going to have some DAO votes. I haven't really seen that take off. I have liked the airdrops that do like stewards. I'm a steward for Gitcoin, ENS, and Optimism, for instance, and I found those are really cool. I like the stewardship approach and the delegation model. But even then, I really don't like just like giving tokens based off of some metrics that end up being gamed by some people sometimes, and then saying, okay, we're decentralized, let's vote. I think having a slower cultural build is really important. And the cultural build and like taking the time to bring people who are involved, have expertise and labor to contribute, and make sure that you cherish those two aspects, and give them a voice and give them special access, then bring in the capital, or at least make sure that capital, labor, and expertise have some kind of balance in their governance mechanism. And I think in the crypto space, we're way too capital focused.
To what you said in the last part of your how do you actually give voice? Like, do you have any, like you said, like to motivate people, the ones that are super proactive, how do you incentivize them? Like you said, giving voice, giving
reward systems, like tracking, and having a regular metric of like praise, for instance, okay, this person received praise from these things, and then quantifying the praise and actually dishing out reputation tokens and making sure that reputation token has a voice. in your governance system. I think that's, and also, you know, people with expertise. It's maybe you have a project that's about, I don't know, planting trees. You know, it's going to be really hard to get the people who like planting trees to like join your Discord. If you can give them some candy, if you can like give, you know, and it can be real candy, just mail them chocolate, whatever it takes, get them to join your Discord. And I think the coolest thing is to give them, you know, a reputation. And maybe every month, you know, the reputation holders get a raffle of tokens, right? I think raffles are actually underused in crypto. They have an incredible social power and have brought a lot of value to small communities, and it's a very efficient way to reward people.
So you mentioned, Griff, decentralization could potentially be a means to an end. And I'm also seeing some messages on Twitter that are interesting to me about the demise of DAOs, right? To the effect that some people are thinking that, you know, it's okay for a DAO to die. In fact, maybe it should die. So I'm wondering, should a DAO's death be planned for in advance? Should DAOs be sort of maybe not limited liability, but limited term organizations? How do you feel about the lifespan of a DAO?
I think that's a great approach, honestly, especially for if you care about the people in the DAO. You know, you know, it's always these weird dynamics where do you draw the boundaries? You know, if you care about individuals, giving them an exit, like when I hire people, I almost always start with a 1 month or 2 month trial period, and we say at this date, you know, we both get to decide. You know, maybe you don't really like this job and you want out, and maybe we don't think you're a cultural fit and we want out. And it's like when you put this hard date, it's kind of like an opportunity for metrics and an opportunity to decide, should we stay or should we go now, you know? And so I don't know. I saw Big Green DAO. There's a really cool DAO by Kimball Musk, Elon Musk's brother, and they're doing food justice in the U.S., supporting like nonprofits solely, right? And it's a really cool system because they give the nonprofits everyone has one person, one vote, and the nonprofits that receive funding, they get one vote, and the donors that give funding, they get one vote. And so it's a really cool thing because now it's not so capital controlled. I love the project. I think it's a really cool experiment, but they know it's an experiment, and they said, hey, September this year, the experiment's over, you know, and we decide at that point if we want to continue it or not. And that is so refreshing and nice because it gives you a participant, you know, it's like, okay, I'm committing till September. And so for the individuals, I think it's better. For Big Green DAO as a you know, character or as like a corporation entity and identity, it's not actually the best for the DAO because then it's going to die. Dying sucks, right? No one wants to die. We have lots of taboos about death and it's uncomfortable, but it's good for individuals to know that they're committing to this point and that they get to assess whether or not they want to continue and they don't just get roped into it. So I love what you proposed just now. I love it. I think it's genius. I think it's best practices of like saying, hey, this is an experiment. We're going to go to this date, then we're going to pause and we're going to see if it goes. And it's kind of it's not necessarily common in the DAO space. You know, we have these preconceptions of DAOs being like forever entities.
Yeah.
And they have this amazing ability to live forever. That I mean, the DAO still exists. You know, that there's actually people who use DAO tokens to vote on stuff.
Oh
still.
wow.
Like if any DAO could die, should die, needed to die, it would be the DAO, right? But it's still there's a snapshot for DAO tokens and people are voting on stuff.
I'm just thinking about this idea of public goods. I watched your ETH Denver presentation. I know that's a major theme for a lot of your work anyway, just sort of this idea of the commons and public goods. And I love this thought that crypto is often too focused on capital. So yeah, we're trying to just kind of figure out our idea, sort of contributing to the public good in relation to the vertical that we're operating in, which is digital fashion, trying to find a way, the best way to distribute funding to independent designers, emerging designers, those that are maybe taking their first steps into the Web3 space, those that are looking for finishing funds on a project, those who haven't traditionally had equitable access to the space, so on and so forth. So we're just modeling that out, trying to sort of figure out how could we or would we build a DAO around that function, and just there's all sorts of questions. So I don't want to sort of hijack the whole conversation, but yeah, how to, we're experimenting with different ways to raise money, trying to figure out governance structure, trying to figure out, should we do selection committees, should we do advisory board? Just there's a million questions. So yeah, that's kind of where we are. So just looking for any sort of insight from individuals like you that are thinking about DAOs, not necessarily as a way to collect something, or not necessarily as a way to acquire something, or not necessarily as a way to invest something, other than investing in people and talent, with the exception that talent will produce something for a greater good, not necessarily to get someone rich.
Yeah. I mean, I do think that there is this opportunity. One of the things that I'm double-sided about is the money side, right? I actually think one of the biggest problems, I think it's more important that we provide value for society than we try to make money. And just, it's more enriching as a person to, drive for value creation that can be shared than for value creation that can be captured. However, at the same time, the fact that value capture that can be shared is not rewarded, and value creation, that is shared, is not actually rewarded, prevents entrepreneurs and innovation, and it prevents success in many ways. We need win-win opportunities in the public good space. So we do need to make sure, in my opinion, that DAOs focus on rewarding investors, labor contributors, and people with expertise, rewarding all of them, and it doesn't have to be with capital. It can be the rewards. I really love Gregory Landau, who's one of the founders of Regen Network, and his post that he made. He built this system before Bitcoin even existed, called the 8 forms of capital. And there's 8, he has 8 different forms of capital, whether it's social, environmental, or I think it's social, living, and financial, and there's just a bunch of others. And you can see if you can make sure that you're giving rewards. It doesn't all have to be rewards on a spreadsheet with money, but you do need to make sure that you are creating a win-win alignment, and I think that it's easiest for the capital to have a spreadsheet reward. I do think it is important as a DAO to find a way to reward your investors in the way that they would want to be rewarded, and or at least give them an upside. It's okay, you stake your capital here, and you get these tokens, and they're locked for 4 years, but they could go up, and this is why they might go up. Because we're going to generate demand for these tokens, and this way we're going to, if you stake tokens behind a project that a designer that ends up making it big, you're going to get a bunch of extra tokens later, whereas the people who stake behind designers that don't make it big, they don't get any of these extra tokens. Success, giving success in this way or that way. Or it could also be hey, you'll have direct access to their first clothing lines, and you can buy before anybody else, and you get they'll send you the free demos or whatever, right? And making sure that there's some clear reward mechanisms for everyone who's participating. And making in nonprofits today, that's just not the case. It relies on sacrifice, and it kills me. It shouldn't be that way. Donors are just sacrificing, volunteers working for free, people taking pay cuts so they can share their expertise. It's
yeah, it doesn't make sense. Yeah, we are changed. I agree. I agree. Brian, do you have any questions based on what you guys are building?
No, like maybe an advice on what we were trying to do. Yes, for the DAO, we're trying to create maybe a community-owned organization. Like now, the freelancers that we're trying to help or the companies that are using our product, they can have ownership of the company through the DAO. So yeah, we are looking at how to implement that. Will it be fully community-owned, or how to divide the tokens, the budget, everything? Like, how will we do that? That's what we're trying to figure out.
I mean, there's just a million ways to do it. I think there's not a right or wrong way. I think the best thing that you can do is find who your stakeholders are and get their thoughts and like kind of stakeholder requirements, right? Like, what do people want? Who are the people that will be important for this project's success, and how do we give them what they want in the token economy so that they'll participate? And if that means making sure the investors have a return, and do the investors actually want governance rights? A lot of times they don't. You know, there's like these cool Moloch DAOs where there's shares and there's loot, and the shares have voting rights, and the loot have like a share of the profits. And a lot of investors are like, listen, I'm delegating to you, man. You're the team or whatever. You guys decide. Maybe they delegate to the community DAO, the reputation DAO. The reputation DAO has all the governance rights, and the investors just get a share of the profits.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, there's a million ways to design these systems. It's code. You know, you can write, look, that you can do it the way Zoom does it, Google Meet does it, Skype does it. You know, like they're all video applications, and they all have different strategies. But in the end, you know, I'm looking into your eyes right now. You know, and that's the key thing. You want to make sure that the primary focus is that you have an organization that can succeed at its goals. And now designing the governance mechanisms should be like the fifth most important thing, other than, you know, because it's governance is means to an end, but you still have to get it right so you can make decisions as an organization. And you really need to know what do your users want? What do the people with expertise, the people with capital, and the people that will contribute labor, what do they want? How do they want to get involved? And then design around that.
I have a question, and it's specifically on how do you handle the case where someone has too much voting power and they are trying to push the DAO in a direction that does not align with the founders and with the core team values and the direction they want for the project?
I mean, this is, if you want to do a DAO, then you need to be okay with that. I mean, I think in the end, if you want the founders to control the project, you should start a company, and then there's very clear rules around that. Or you can design it around this fact that, you know, token holders don't have governance power. You can make these decisions. You have to figure out what you want before you get there. Don't just DAO and be like, yeah, this will work out. If someone buys a lot of tokens, then you know, they should have also been, you know, one of the biggest problems I see with the current market dynamics around DAOs is that when you buy tokens, you're not necessarily supporting the DAO directly. You know, if the DAO has a bunch of those tokens, now, you know, like that's another interesting thing that can happen. Like you could say that like the founder group has a bunch of these tokens, and if someone comes in, buys a lot of tokens, and tries to, you know, attack the DAO through governance, well, then the founding team can sell all their tokens and start a new project. And they kind of have this guns pointing at each other dynamic, right? Where it's like,
yeah,
you have to work together. And I think the best way to deal with those issues is to create a culture of advice process and communication, and be very open and transparent with your intentions, and set a mission at the beginning. There's this really cool system on Gnosis chain called Celeste, where the DAO has this covenant. It says, this is our mission. This is what we want to do. And if someone's like, okay, if the mission is to, bank the unbanked, and then, and that's the focus, and someone comes in, buys a bunch of tokens, and is like, hey, let's integrate with Bank of America and give a off ramp for this. You could actually say, hey, actually, this goes against our covenant.
Yep.
And the vote, even if it had all the token support in the world, someone could challenge that vote, say it goes against the covenant, and it would go to a decentralized jury that would make this subjective oracle be say, yes, this goes against the covenant, or it doesn't. And so you can kind of, you can do that in a centralized way if you'd like. The primary goal here is you have to set the objectives, you have to set the mission, and you have to set the what and the why.
Mm-hmm.
And the how. If it fits in that framework, it should be okay for a large token holder to say, hey, I think we should make this Twitter app and integrate it for the unbanked. They want to do it that way, and they can build a team around it, and they can divert funds that the treasury is going to that team. That should be okay if you want this to be a DAO.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a very good approach.
Yeah, Maria and I actually were talking about this afternoon. I said we need a mission statement, and from there we can build our DAO, because we don't have that. And you have no guidance for anybody.
I think that
we do have it, but it's not that clear. I think we need
right. That's what I'm saying. Right, but then people see it, they read, they go, I'm in or I'm out, and then they understand what you're standing up for. So it's another way of governing. It's like a constitution.
And legitimacy. It needs to be legitimate too, right? So if you already have a community, how do you legitimize it? I feel like the first step is a reputation DAO.
Yeah.
And it can just be a spreadsheet. I do strongly believe that you need to have you have to decide how to decide. That is the first thing. And if you're deciding how to decide is Marina and Chang get into a back room and decide how to decide, that's fine. As long as it's transparent, as long as everyone knows, actually, Marina and Chang are going to go decide our direction, our mission, vision, value statement. And that's just how it's going to be. It's like, okay, cool. That's great. So a lot of people want that. Okay, I'll be honest. Most people want that. Even if they don't say they do, right? That's fine, as long as it's clear, right? This is how decisions are made about these things and those things. And once you've decided how to decide, now you can start deciding things like the mission, vision, values, and and then they become legitimate because you're following a process, and it's not the tyranny of structurelessness. It's like
basically the basic rules of humanity.
Yeah. When they're in kindergarten, here are the basic agreements we have.
Yeah, and I like reputation systems.
I love that idea.
Maybe Marina and Chang are like the top, reputation holders. And it's like, okay, well, and this is how you earn reputation. So you can be a top reputation holder too.
Madeline, did you want to jump in? Madeline knows a lot about our specific DAO, so I'm sure she has something to say. Madeline?
Hi, Griff. Really, really nice to hear all your experiences. We've been extremely excited about this one for a while in the team. Thank you so much. Yeah, when you were talking about different like models around reputation and things, also it comes to mind like distributing value and performance. So it's something we've been talking a lot about and seen different tools for. For you, what has been one of the successful ways to actually like acknowledge the value of contributors? So not necessarily by the quantity of what they do or something, but have you been using any particular tools or like philosophies or frameworks or something about, how do you actually recognize who are the real value contributors in this DAO?
I really love praise. I mean, I've mentioned it a couple of times, but you're like setting it up on a tee here because that's exactly what it's for. It's just really nice because anyone can praise anyone. You know, it's not this top-down reward system. It's a qualitative, like the other side of it is source cred. Source cred is super cool. However, it's unmaintained. And I think there's going to be a couple of replacements that come up for it soon. But like, it's really easy. What I should say, there are ways to, I shouldn't say it's easy. It's not easy, but there are ways to quantify quantitative contributions, right? This person made a forum post with this many likes. This person donated this much money, right? Like, you can quantify those contributions. Qualitative contributions, I mean, are just difficult. Qualitative, turning any kind of qualitative like contribution or the quality of anything into something that's quantified. This is, again, like a basic humanity problem, you know, like this is a really challenge. And this is where praise comes in. Praise is really nice because I can say, yo, you know, Madeline, I want to praise Madeline for setting me up for an easy way to shill the praise system, you know? And then I can put that in Discord. But then what we do is all of that praise gets aggregated, and every 2 weeks, community members, anyone who wants to, goes and quantifies it, and they score it. And each praise gets scored like 3 or 4 times, and the average score turns into tokens. And maybe those tokens are reputation, maybe those tokens are going. If everyone's like, dude, who cares about you shilling praise? That's dumb. We don't want to give that a score. And it gets 0. It doesn't get any tokens, actually, you know? If I want to praise Griff for praising, ha ha ha, you know, 0, you know. But now you have community members seeing what everyone is praising, and you have this like nice feedback mechanism. You have a way for community members to actually see all the stuff that's happening, and it just creates this nice flow and this like a way to build reputation within a community. And yeah, and it's made specifically, like, you know, it came out of the Giveth ecosystem. And it got fused with something that we do at Burning Man, honestly. And we've been battle testing it for years at this point, and now it's like a real product that can be used. So it's open source. It's not like the best documented right now, but by the end of the year, it will be something that anyone can just spin up. And it doesn't have to be that way. We started it with a spreadsheet. You can just make a quick
that word.
Right.
It's okay. I'm just kidding. All right. Was that valid? Do you have another question?
Yeah. So I think like there's always this it's kind of like a way of doing community-based 360 almost. It's like being able to have like multiple eyes on something, and if some people are involved like in the day-to-day, then they can actually like acknowledge that or something. Have you ever had it the other way around, where there's been a time where you need to actually give constructive feedback on something that didn't really go well in the DAO? Because I'm trying to get my head around all of those things when you go from like team to DAO, and I've not seen anyone talking about that side of things really.
Yeah. So first off, praise is not the way you pay people in a DAO, right? Like if you know, it's one piece of a larger reward system. And I think it's important that there's also accountability measures. Praise is not an accountability measure. This is just a way really to get contributors to get involved and be rewarded, and maybe to reward reputation to core team members and these sorts of things, right? For actual management of people, you know, management provides a lot of value besides direction of work. There's feedback rounds and, you know, reviews, regular scheduled reviews, and determining of salaries and these sorts of things. And the way that we do that in the flat, you know, ideally, like DAOs generally align well with teal organizations and flat organizations, holacracy, sociocracy. There's a lot of ways to to manage being flat, and has nothing to do with being a DAO. It has everything to just with your your choice of hierarchical structure and how decisions are made. One of the things that we developed in Giveth and Common Stack and Token Engineering Commons is called the buddy system. So you don't necessarily have a manager, but you do have a person who gives you reviews. And we just have simple type forms. It's kind of like the 360 thing, where anyone can give feedback on anybody at any time, and they make the type form. It can be positive, it can be negative. And then, but there is a buddy who reads that feedback. We have someone, you know, managing the system, sending the type forms to the right people before their scheduled review calls and all of this. It's a coordination, team coordination. This is HR work, basically. But then the buddy delivers the message to the person who had the contributor feedback form. And this allows for feedback cycles that are really hard to get when you don't have managers. When you have a manager, there's clear processes that allow for feedback, you know, and they're also directing your work and they're watching your work. And here, you know, it's better because you're honestly getting everyone's feedback from all directions. But now you have to create a culture where filling out these forms is valued and you're a hero, and you have to like encourage it, because people don't want to fill out forms and give reviews. You know, they love, honestly, what I found though is they love getting them, at least contributors who you want.
Yeah.
They love getting that feedback. Oh my
You love
God,
to read it, understand what they're doing, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, sometimes it's harsh, so we don't, you know, it's up to the buddy to decide if they're going to send the text to them. You know, it's up to the buddy. You know, it's not their manager. Honestly, sometimes a buddy is, you would say classically, lower on the poll. You know, and often not everyone is a buddy. We try to make sure that most people have buddies, and they're different than, it's not like they're reviewing each other. It's like, oh, I'm this person's buddy, and this person is that person's buddy, and we kind of have this web of buddies. But some people just aren't good at giving reviews either. You know, a lot of the devs are not buddies. Let's just be real.
Yeah.
You know, and it's their choice if they want to be a buddy or not, or if they're a buddy, they're only a buddy to one of their devs that they work with. But sometimes you have people who love being buddies, and they want to be like 6 people's buddies, and they just, yeah.
So it's like a choice they can choose, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but when we hire someone and we create a clear work agreement with people, which is always important. Have something written down.
Yeah.
When you make payments to people as a DAO, if you're going to give them either an hourly paycheck or you know, if it's a bounty, it's a bounty. You don't need to just say, this is the thing we want done, and like, who's going to take the bounty? Okay, that's one way. But then if you're going to pay someone hourly or monthly, then you should have something written down. And part of that for us is you have to have a buddy. Who's going to be your buddy? And so it's kind of on you as the person being hired to find a buddy.
Yeah. Or
the person who's hiring that person to find them a buddy, you know? So it's like, it's part of the requirements of getting to the work agreement.
Yeah, it's baked into your culture.
At least our processes, for sure. And it's got to be baked into our culture. Yeah. Like I would say it's not baked into the Common Stack culture, but we're only 8 people.
Okay.
Whereas it's very much part of the Giveth culture, and very and it's, in some ways it's pretty complicated the way, like, people, you know, we have systems of offboarding as well. How do we fire someone? Like, part of the feedback form, there's escalated to critical feedback, and that's like, maybe we should let this person go, that kind of stuff. And we try to do this in a decentralized way, and it's hard. It's really hard, but it needs to be done.
Are there ever times or routines where you maybe run towards more of a centralized startup? So for example, there's maybe people who end up taking on a role, and then another person taking on a role, and eventually they actually become like some kind of department, essentially, rather than it being totally decentralized, which could also run into, you know, legal and everything like that. Are there some like things to watch out for there about how you can tend towards becoming centralized?
Honestly, I feel like that is decentralized, and that's kind of the goal. Like we don't as a DAO, operating as a DAO at the base level doesn't make any sense most of the time, and you see it in most DAOs. They're called circles, working groups, swarms, work streams, whatever. There's like a million different labels for them, but basically the DAO issues money, and that's what it's good at. You know, that's what it does. So where does that money go? If that money is just going to a bunch of individuals, honestly, it's a lot of bureaucracy and overhead, and it's annoying. And every individual has to ask for that money. This is not a good use of time. It's way better to have work streams or working groups where the one working group has one person who's making the application. Hey, like, here's our budget for the next 3 months. This working group has these people. We might hire one more person. We need this much money. You know, they can have levels of financial transparency that they want. They can have one lead, and they can have more of a hierarchical team structure. I mean, like, let's just be real. We know how to develop software. You have a product owner, a product manager, project manager, front end, back end, you know, DevOps. You have these roles, and not everyone is the decider of like everything all the time. You have a product owner who is the decider and for that product, and they make a cohesive, beautiful piece of art that people can enjoy. And so it's the same for everything, you know. It's so in general, I prefer DAOs to focus. The DAO is like, do we fund this working group or not? Do we support? And there can even be competing working groups. You know, some DAOs have multiple Twitters because one guy said, "Hey, I want to run the Twitter," and another guy says, "I want to run the Twitter," and they fund both of them. Both proposals passed, and so now they have 2 Twitters. Like, that's not always the most efficient. You know, sometimes it's better to have a communication work stream, and then that communication work stream says, "This is what we're going to do." Request for funding, they execute, and in some ways, you're kind of insulating a lot of people who just want to execute on work and don't necessarily want to deal with the bureaucracy of being part of a DAO, like directly. So big fan. I think it is decentralization, actually, because it's not distributed. Distributed is one thing, decentralized is another. And the main thing is there's no single point of failure. If this comms department fucks up and does a horrible job, another group can say, "Hey, fund us. We're going to do comms instead."
Yeah. Did that answer your question, Madeline?
Yeah, I love it. Thank you.
I mean, I really want to thank you, Griff. I know you're very, very busy, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to all of us in our community.
Yeah, it's my mission is to support these kinds of things like DAOs that are trying to make the world a better place. So it's my pleasure to be a part of it and meet all of you guys. It's super cool. And hopefully, well, I know I'll see you in Paris, and hopefully we'll see you guys around in the various other places in the world and other video calls.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
That
you.
was really useful, really, really interesting.
Thank you.